I'm calling to order our planning mission. Commissioner Garver is going to have our invocation this evening.
Let's bow our heads, please. Father, this evening we come to you with grateful hearts. Thanking you for your many blessings. Thank you for this opportunity that we have together to talk about the city and the future and plans that need to be made. Help us to accomplish your will, Lord. In your name we pray. Amen.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Lamb,
Here.
Commissioner Garver,
Here.
Member Friesen, Member Lehman,
Here.
Member Moody,
Here.
Vice Chairman Givens,
Here.
Chairwoman Gray.
Here. And we need to look at the minutes from our previous meeting, and I'm ready to entertain a motion on those whenever you guys are ready on that.
I move approve.
Second.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Mayor Lamb,
Yay.
Commissioner Garver,
Yes.
Member Lehman,
Yes.
Member Moody,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Givens,
Yes.
Chairwoman Gray.
Yes. Okay, and we have an item of new business this evening about townhouse zoning, so I'll pass that to staff.
Get that set up. Thank you. We have a two-part, one that is a new business item, and then another is a discussion, and they're really interrelated. One really can go before the other, they're interchangeable, but they're related to zoning demand and discrepancies or weaknesses that we've discovered, and we've actually discussed here previously. So one of the issues that we perpetually, or one of the things that we continually do is as we encounter it or it's brought to our attention, sometimes that's the way it happens, you highlight weaknesses within the zoning ordinance. And by the way, our zoning code, parts of it probably are nearly half a century old. Dates back to the early 70s, large portions of it. So with that in mind, consumer demand today is different than it was in the early 70s, preferences. So it reflects a different era of development, different needs. The residential zones in particular are coarse, and so that the range of existing districts don't address the evolving consumer preferences and market shifts. So, I mean, you really have about 4 flavors there, and neither one of them adequately cover some of the changing demands that we're seeing. As I said, zoning text in some cases is almost 50 years old. So tonight's topic, the case for the townhouse, we are somewhat behind some of our nearby peers, and I say behind, it's relative here, but the case for the townhouse, the city of Collegedale does not have a standalone townhouse zone that allows townhouses. They require a convoluted rezoning or a planned unit development, even when the proposed site is well suited for that kind of development. And we're seeing increased demand for well-designed, missing middle housing types that are integrated into the suitable areas. And missing middle meaning middle density, middle range here, townhouses, row houses, zero lot line homes. We do have examples of this in the city, but they were typically part of a planned unit development, a PUD. And we're seeing more interest in this because this housing type, it doesn't have to be strictly a townhouse, by definition, although we will define that. But it can be just a smaller lot, less maintenance. It captures 2 markets potentially, first-time buyers or first-time move-up buyers, singles, younger families, and also older households that are downsizing. Because maintenance costs are less, the maintenance burden overall is much less. So we're seeing interest in this, but for example, outside of a PUD, about the only way to apply for a townhouse development would be an R3 zoning request, which is a very permissive zone, and then you systematically condition out the uses that we do not want, or don't think is appropriate in those locations. Those conditions can always be lifted potentially later. And it's just, there are a lot of other factors that, that's just not good zoning practice to have that course of a response to it. So I want to direct your attention to, this is Reunion over East Brainerd, behind the Hurricane Creek Publix area. So this is the aerial here. I just wanted to kind of give you an example of how this can be applied. Now, this was a PUD, but this can also be a self-contained zone. Purple here, I've just highlighted some of the alleys for rear loading access, so that if you're able to do that, you're able to push the setbacks a little closer to the street. That's the main public right-of-way there. Open space down there on the bottom. So on the street, it looks like this. Sign's going to vary depending on the preferences, and you see there's some off-street parking there. So one of the things I want to bring up is that a townhouse and what we're proposing here, this is very similar to what our peers do in some of the other cities. Chattanooga has a version of this, and I think Signal Mountain does, and the county may have something tied. There's several varieties of this kind of zone in the county and the city of Chattanooga. So there is precedent for it nearby here. We just don't have one ourselves. Keep in mind that these are fee simple lots. And what that means is that the structure here that is set with zero lot line, meaning it goes all the way to the property line. There's a firewall in between, but the property underneath it is, the land underneath it is owned by the homeowner. It's not like a condominium where you have an undivided interest in all the common spaces and you own from the walls in. This is actually, you own the land underneath it. So it's considered a fee simple form of ownership versus a condominium. So that's part of the requirements here. And I will provide this for everybody. This is just a chart that I've provided basically to help myself look at this, that the R1T is what I've kind of tentatively just proposed to call this. But look over at R3, single family detached dwellings, two family dwellings, other attached dwellings, and this is verbatim from the zoning code, patio homes, townhouses, multifamily dwellings, mobile home parks. So if the city, the planning commission, the board of commissioners has an issue, is uncomfortable with one of those uses, obviously R3 can't just be applied without some sort of conditioning. And then if you've conditioned everything but one, there's nothing. That indicates to me that there's not a problem so much with the development proposal, but there's a problem with the zone. So that's kind of what we're facing right here. And then on the other side of that, R1L and R1H, you can see some of the standards here, minimum lot sizes. You'll notice that the townhouse, 2,400 square feet, and zero lot line dwellings, 3,500 square feet. Basically, that's a 35 by 100, and that can be a point of discussion as far as the lot size, but that's how we arrive at the lot area there. The only other alternative kind of close by, R2, for example, strangely enough, the zoning code currently allows for 15,000 square foot minimum lot size for a single family dwelling. But if you're going to do two family dwellings, the zone does not address more than 2 units. Although it explicitly allows patio homes, it does not necessarily address townhouses in any form or fashion. In fact, a minimum lot size of 17,000 square feet, that already indicates to me that it does not anticipate fee simple ownership. It simply is accommodating duplexes, one structure on one lot versus 2 fee simple lots. So that is an era gone by. Not that it's not useful in some areas of the city now, because we do have those uses, and we've rezoned to that recently in appropriate places. But in this case, it does not accommodate a fee simple owner-occupied townhouse. R1H is just down from there, 8,000 square feet for all lots. Well, this is the closest thing we have. It allows single-family detached dwellings and patio homes, but every lot still has to be 8,000 square feet. Nothing wrong with that, but if you're looking for a townhouse, row house, or even patio zero lot line, that's not going to allow it. So this is the conundrum that we've seen. Let's see here. I wouldn't,
Real quick question.
sure.
Are these restrictions from the state or these are just,
These are these are local, part of our local zoning
Okay.
ordinance that,
so these are just things that we've seen other communities do?
this is what we do now. So
Okay.
we don't have a way to accommodate the R1T or the townhouse type units.
Okay.
Um,
Everything else we have?
we allow all these other, yeah, this is our zoning ordinance except for the blue column there. That's what's proposed. So this is what we already allow. We have a broad latitude to amend this to our local needs. Down at the bottom, maximum gross density per acre allowed. The 2.9 units per acre gross, that is in the R1L, 4.5 in R1H, 8 units per acre proposed in the townhouse zone, varies in the R2 zone, and it's a difficult calculation. It doesn't make a lot of sense for staff, city, and users, and 15.3 units per acre maximum gross density under the R3. So this is, you can see here, this, we're calling this the missing middle. It fits into the missing middle here. Something else, I'll pull you back up to the top here. Obviously, sewer would be required for something with this density. Is there a design review process for a rezoning? Typically, we want to see a sketch for R1L, R1H for subdivision. But for example, it is not required as part of the zoning ordinance. The proposed R1T or the townhouse zone does require a design review process, does require open space, and the plan is adopted with the zoning approval. This is like a PUD, it's like a mini PUD, so that we have a chance to look at the site, the layout, the landscaping, any kind of buffering from the exterior of the development, and lot configuration. This will come through staff and you all before it's approved, and then it's like a PUD. The site plan is part of the approval. They have to adhere to it. It's what you see is what you get. So that is markedly different from simply rezoning a piece of property R1L, and there's no expectation of a site plan there. So this is a little different, and we feel that the density justifies that, and it's in keeping with our peers.
So 2 questions, Kelly. Great chart, right? That makes it easy to flow kind of what we've got and what you're proposing there. But 2 things. Why is green space required? And then why is sewer required? I get the density, right? And if you're 100 gallons per home or whatever the rule of thumb is, right? Why are we requiring that be on sewer?
It's because of the density, and sewer, it is strictly because of the density is, well, not strictly, but that's the greatest component to it. Because of septic systems are going to, or even step systems are most likely going to, or whatever other approved TDEC system is going to require additional space than a townhouse would provide by, a 2,400 square foot lot, you're not going to be able to accommodate that. So it's strictly based on the density and, by extension, the lot sizes. And the open space is that's also in keeping with some of our peers. That is to provide, think of Downing Green, the central green there, something more like that there is green space that's available for throwing the ball, play, because this just kind of harkens back to when lots typically were smaller, and you had a central commons, if you will. That was the community open space that was actually usable. It's not a scrub lot is a usable open space, and it has a defined purpose. And so this harkens back to that. When you have a smaller personal space, that becomes your extension of your backyard.
So are we defining that based on the number of units? They have to equal blank open space?
Right.
Would that be the plan?
It's going to run 20% of the site would have to be open space.
And when you say of the site, what does the site mean?
The gross acreage of the site.
So 100 acre, you'd have to have 20 acres of green space?
Correct.
Okay.
We don't anticipate this being used on that scale. This would be more of a 2 to 5 acre application. If something larger, to answer Commissioner Garver, on 100, it would most likely be a PUD with a range of housing types.
Yeah.
This does allow a range, but a more narrow range than a PUD would. So this is really has been our mindset to fill in this gap. Ultimately, we would like to revamp the entire zoning code, but as we joke in our spare time, it's been hard to come by, but this is something that we've identified as a critical need that we wanted to bring to you all.
How does this fit into our overall land use plan?
In terms of the type of development, this would be not looking at transects, but the land use plan discusses, inner suburban or basically more where you have your services. We would see this where the services are readily available. And so that is compatible with the land use plan, which does advocate for a more denser development in areas where you do have the adequate infrastructure, such as sidewalks, sewer, of course, utilities are there, and transportation access.
Because as I recall in our land use plan, only a certain percentage of the area was going to be dedicated to apartment or high density housing, and that was pretty much taken up, I thought, with all the apartments that we have in the west part of our town.
You are correct. This is the alternative to apartments.
So if there is a large area, say the Longley property right behind where I live comes into the city, which they plan to develop once the older Longleys are no longer with us. Her family has told me they're going to develop that. Does that mean that that area could be then built up with this type of housing to where it's high density right behind where I live?
No, this would be judiciously applied by the Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners. And as staff, I would say that would not be an appropriate blanket zoning for that location.
This would be more existing 2-acre lot infill type projects.
Instead of greenfield, correct?
Yeah, and that goes, if I may, that goes back to my question a little bit. To Brian, I understand the sewer because you're never going to get that small lots, but the open space requirement, there's open space requirement in a PUD, and you
Correct.
can do townhomes in a PUD. But if you have an infill where you've got a small acre lot and somebody wants to throw row houses in, there's still a 20% requirement without a PUD. And I'm just curious how I guess that would be my only question to that chart. I understand the reason why we would want to create a town. Right? If you want a townhome and the only way to do it is R3 with conditions, then you throw an R3 where maybe it doesn't make sense to have an R3. You need so I guess that's the only thing I didn't really understand, that open space requirement. If you have a small infill lot and you want to throw row houses in.
And also keep in mind, and I didn't point this out earlier, is that the open space, part of the open space requirement, so if you have 2 acres, you need 20% of that to be open space. You can also include the landscaping that would be required anyway, the perimeter buffering landscaping for the site as a whole. That can be included in your open space. So
Is that the way we would define it, or is that the way it is generally defined?
that's the way we would define it in this, and that is part of the zoning ordinance. That's what part of the proposal is that it's not all the landscaping and then 20% open space. That does count toward your total.
And that starts at the foundation?
No, that starts at the perimeter of the overall site itself, not on each individual lot. So whatever landscaping is required that's generated by our existing landscaping tables, depending on the usage, the adjacent uses. If it's a 10-foot buffer, if there's a street yard required, that all goes into the open space total.
So those are the details that would be generated as part of
Right.
the zone.
And that's part of the site plan review process that would come through all the way through here and then up to you all for if the zoning is requested. And keep in mind that this is not rezoning property at this point. This is creating an option in the future where the planning commission staff and the board of commissioners still have the ability to judiciously apply it, which goes back to the mayor's comment that it is important that we look at existing plans and discussions where it is most appropriate. And that would be sort of the next step. Because I do feel like Wayne said that it is and more of an infill product, and it is going to be west of the ridge most likely, simply because that's where that type of property is. Corridors like Appleton Pike or Little Debbie Parkway, where we're not seeing development, and that's actually our next conversation even after this. We're seeing a lot of information, or a lot of interest in different types of development, but it is not, we don't really have a lot of the tools yet.
Well, that was going to be my point. It's a tool that gives you an option other than an R3 with a bunch of conditions.
Right. You can leave it in the toolbox, or you can, if you need it, you can take it out and use it.
Would tiny houses can be included in this? Tiny houses?
No, ma'am.
No tiny houses, okay.
We
I
have a
kind of wanted
minimum
to,
Dwelling unit size. We have a minimum dwelling unit size.
that precludes the tiny houses. Okay. I just kind of wanted to back up big picture a little bit. In your earlier slide, you referenced, some of the market shifts that you're seeing. And I think we all have an idea of probably what those are, but I'd like to just verbalize I'd love to hear what you're seeing and what those shifts are.
And that actually is the next presentation
Okay.
following this covers a lot of that. And if there's some gaps in there, then we can.
Okay.
Do you not foresee some possible issues with the open space where, say, I've got, my lot is 50, 60% open space going in, and others are just, less than the 20% even. But the whole site meets the 20%. But I decide I want to build something else more onto my property. Now I'm wanting to get, use mine 80%, but due to the fact that other people in the site have used more than their 20%, then I'm being restricted because of them.
So the open space is typically on a fee simple lot held by the HOA and maintained
Okay.
by the HOA.
Okay, so,
And then what each individual person builds on their lot is each lot.
Yeah, we were finding that we had to separate the individual lot requirements from the overall site requirements, which is why I sort of informally called it a mini PUD, a review that would delineate where that open space is, whether it is, just like you would in a PUD, what will remain open space. And the individual lots, as long as they meet, the typical standards, then the homeowners can, use those as they see fit. Well, within HOA and zoning limits, of course.
And just thinking big picture, why haven't we done that in the past, and what's requiring us to do it now? I mean, I know it's come up a couple different times, and I'm just trying to remember all those specifics.
There's no single project that we have that is pending, but we've just noticed that there is a shift in some interest in different types of housing. And we're not talking apartments, because the mayor's correct. The zoning allowing that is pretty much has been exhausted on Appleton Pike. But beyond that, the housing market, as we've all heard, we're seeing a lot of in-migration. We have all the issues you've heard about in the news. But there's a lack of housing diversity between price points. And this is that missing middle of the housing right now that we've seen. We're all 400, 450,000, 500,000 plus on some of these houses. Just at Cambridge, same thing, 700,000, 800,000 just down the road, 600,000. We're part of this market. We're not separate from this area's housing market. That's one thing that we always have to remember, that it doesn't necessarily know the city limit. It does follow other things, but one of the things that we don't have that our neighbors have, Hamilton County unincorporated or City of Chattanooga, which is at Cambridge Square, is this tool to use. So our toolbox doesn't have this type of hammer. Everybody else has that. And we're seeing that because of that, we're not as poised to take advantage of that, what we think is a beneficial development type.
So my last comment would be going back to the green space is roof green space, patio space on roofs with the townhome approach. Is that counting towards or separate from the green space that we would define?
That's separate. The calculation would be simply based on the initial site dimensions, and then regardless of the number of lots on there, there would have to, the number of lots and the configuration would have to be based on that 20% calculation of the overall site.
Okay, so they would get no credit for green infrastructure on the roof.
Not individual. We haven't discussed that. We haven't. I mean, that's not something that's we've seen very much demand for that, or at least not that can't be included in the future.
And then would that, if the 35 feet, right, does that include from foundation to max eave height? What is that measurement focused on?
The 2.5 story or 35
Yeah.
feet, and that's foundation to the top of the
highest.
gabled peak. Yeah.
Okay.
So would this zoning situation fit the Pratt project up here on Apison?
It wouldn't have fit that. We think that had, another proposal, this could have been useful for a similar proposal in its place, perhaps. The difference being the fee simple lot requirement. And some models, particularly that one, did not want to put fee simple lots. They didn't want to create. We even encouraged them to do that during the early process. But once again, we didn't have a quick and easy mechanism. Not that they would have chosen to use that tool, but we didn't even have it at that time.
Option.
The county has an RTZ, which is our zero lot.
Right. This is very similar to that because Chattanooga's in Hamilton County is very similar. There's some minor difference. I'm going back to the RPA days, but so this is very similar to that. There's really nothing. This is one of those things that I don't feel like this is. I'm not displaying this as a groundbreaking new type of zoning. It's actually dragging us, to be on parity with our peers, and because it's very similar to what they already do.
And so if I'm just going to summarize for my own understanding, so the benefit to having this R1T is we don't have to zone it R3 with a PUD and exclude all the other things. We just have something that's set up for townhomes where people can buy their individual fee simple lots, and it'll just be there set up ready to go instead of trying to say we have this bigger thing, but then we have to do all these conditions.
Right.
Is that
Right.
okay?
It's
So what do you need from us? Is this a motion to
to
accept the adoption of this, or?
to recommend, whatever the will of the commission is, to send that forward to the full board of commissioners as a zoning amendment or a zoning ordinance addition. What I'm not getting into the minutia of, we'll have to renumber the whole thing, and there's a whole process to renumber the zoning ordinance, but I figured that's self-evident, and I don't want to bore y'all with that.
So you're saying you believe it's ready to be passed on
Yes.
to the commission?
Yes, unless you have any additional recommendations that part of your recommendation.
I want to ask a question, the difference between a patio home that's attached to another patio home and a townhouse.
Typically, it's going to be the height of the building, and a townhouse is going to have potentially a zero lot line on both sides. You're going to have a unit here and property underneath it. A patio home may be situated on one side only, and share one side with another one, or it may be even offset, but it's all the way up to the property line, and then the green space and drive around that. So it's a variation on a similar concept.
Are the patio homes like the ones that are built out on Udawaringo Road, just south past, no, out, way on out past Food City? There's a retirement area out there. Are those patio homes?
I believe the ownership form, I believe, is condominium, Stonecrest, but
Mhm.
I think they do have some that would be considered patio homes. But I don't think they're on fee simple lots. That would be the only difference.
I'm just trying to get a picture in my mind, the real difference between the two.
The patio homes, and I would propose that, we can even strike, specific references to patio homes and simply discuss zero lot line. And therefore, that takes the definition out, and it will build in flexibility going forward, so that that cottage homes could potentially, single-family detached cottage homes could potentially take advantage of this as well, which you see that those types of houses in Barnsley, in the row of cottage homes. They are detached, but they do have smaller lots, and the drives are in the back. That's part of the site planning right there, and site plan review that we would approve. Those would be mandatories that we would have to see to reduce those setbacks. And
You mentioned at the beginning of our discussion that the changing zoning demand PowerPoint kind of interrelates with this. I'm wondering if we should go ahead and do that and then come back to, if we're ready for a vote on the townhouse zone. Does that sound okay? Or do we need to go ahead and conclude the townhouse zone and do a vote on that before we jump to the next?
it's the will of the commission. You can suspend normal rules if you agree to that, and then make that recommendation following the next item on the agenda. You can table that until
Yeah,
the conclusion.
I've just got a question about, are we voting on a chart, or are we voting on a document? I typically see a zoning.
It was in the,
It's in the packet.
It's in the packet,
document. Okay,
the text of
perfect.
the zone.
Gotcha.
He wrote it out.
I was gonna go by somewhere before I came, but I came straight here. So, perfect.
You've had a
This just highlights.
I'm personally okay, so
and
short of making that, but if Chairwoman would love to hear the other side of the agenda, that's totally fine as well. So. Just put that.
You guys,
Sounds good to me. Just go ahead and hear the second part, and then we can come back.
okay. Well, if we can table this and hear, I'm very interested in the big picture of everything that's going on.
And this probably doesn't cover it precisely, but I think it probably heads in the direction you seem to be going with that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if, do we need to vote to table this item before we go on to the next one, or?
Yes, if that's the will of the commission to vote to table this until the conclusion of the next
Our next
item.
agenda item.
I move we table this until the next agenda.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Mayor Lamb,
Yay.
Commissioner Garver,
Yes.
Member Lehman,
Yes.
Member Moody,
Yes.
excuse me, Chairman Givens,
Yes.
and Chairwoman Gray.
Yes. Okay. Our
Okay,
next
and-
item, the changing zoning demand PowerPoint, please.
And Commissioner Garver and Mayor Lamb have seen this, so there may be spoilers, but they've seen this at workshop, and we felt that this was something that would be good for the planning commission as well, just because it touches on so much of what we do here. So changing development, changing zoning needs, what's hot, what's not. Background, of course, that you all know, communities that adopted zoning ordinance, every property has to be assigned a zoning district. So if you change a property zoning, you are in effect changing the adopted ordinance. You're changing the law every time you change a property's zoning. The owner can request this. or an agent acting on behalf of the owner, or local government as part of a zoning study. That's less common. We've done that once since I've been here. Normally it is an owner-initiated process. In either case, the rationale for doing so should be expressed clearly to staff and to the Planning Commission. And then that's where the decision point comes in, is how it affects the property owner, nearby property owners, and if it's detrimental to the city as a whole. So that, in a nutshell, is what we do day in and day out, or at least month in and month out at Planning Commission. So what is hot right now and what doesn't seem to be hot in the current market? Well, places to live, aside from the major Plant 5 expansion, permitting for residential construction has consistently outpaced commercial and industrial development, and over the last 2 years particularly. So whereas the valuation and the number of permits used to be opposite of that, we've seen them completely flip. A lot of inquiries, questions, discussions about single-family detached homes and townhouses. We continue to get a lot of calls and questions about locations for multifamily dwellings. And I want to separate this very clearly from townhouses. Although they are attached, they are individual dwellings, single-family owned versus an apartment or a condominium for that matter. So with the questions that we're getting, and to Mayor Lamb's earlier point, we do not, and that is by design, we do not have a property that's really zoned and ready for more apartments because we're looking at the balance of units and the whole diversity of the housing types. So with these questions that we're getting, the development inquiries that we're getting, is it a problem? And I say possibly. I want to put a number up there that's even old at this point. That's the 2020 median home sales price in Hamilton County. So we've gone through another year of some pretty interesting times in the housing market. So this was last year, 259.9 median home sales price in Hamilton County. That's new and existing. 343. We'll put that number up there. That's the median home sales price in our area, not exclusively Collegedale, but the Collegedale-Ooltewah area is listed by the Board of Realtors, the Chattanooga Area Council. So that's right there shows you something that we haven't seen those numbers in quite a while, but if you see the difference between the overall county and then us, what's going on? What you think is probably going on, scarcity of available and developable residential land. It's an ongoing factor. The city's footprint is not expected to significantly expand in the next decade. There are situations where the mayor alluded to if certain property owners ever wanted to develop in the future, that would be a conversation then, but it's not expected to significantly expand in the next decade. What are we seeing? An influx of newcomers to Hamilton County that's putting upward pressure on home values amid a tight supply. So we're not only seeing people from Bradley or Catoosa or Polk County or internal shifts within Hamilton County. We're seeing from completely outside of this region. We're seeing people from California, Idaho. I'm thinking of my neighbors that have moved in the last 2 years. California, Idaho, Michigan, another Idaho, 2 more California, Nashville. You kind of get, and I'm part of that area too out here. So we're seeing a lot of influx we haven't really seen before. So stopping point right here. Didn't we think retail and commercial development was where we should focus our attention? We've had those conversations. My answer is yes. However, COVID-19, acceleration of online commerce, which has slowed down somewhat, but it has also been far exceeded expectations of where online commerce as a percentage of overall sales would be at this point. Remote work options, the shifting consumer preferences. We're seeing that boomers are consuming less in retirement as expenditures shift from material goods to healthcare and experiences like travel, et cetera. It's experiential. Keep following that. Younger generations also willing to spend disposable income on experiences, less attention on traditional brick and mortar shopping, unless there's an experience involved with it. Yeah, it's not just a run down to whatever. Typically, their destination centers tend to have, and we have a limited capacity for that just because of location. And I don't know if anybody's ever seen the Buc-ee's yet. And yeah, I mean, it truly is. That's an experience, believe it or not. It's a convenience store the size of
200 pumps.
It's 200 pumps, and it's probably 30,000 square feet.
Yeah.
It's the size of a pretty, of a Hurricane Creek Publix almost. We made sure to stop in there, and it is an experience. But those are the kind of things that people will travel for. Here's something. Online retail sales increased 32.4% year over year in 2020, up 39% in first quarter of 2021 over the previous quarter last year. Obviously, that's a lot is driven by COVID, but and those numbers have, from what I understand, they began to come down a little bit as far as the shift to online, but it is not going away. So what does this mean for communities like us? Potentially less in-person impulse shopping by people outside the city or in, for that matter, meaning fewer imported dollars left behind in the local economy. You're stopping and you get gas and you go in and you pick up this and that and the other, or you run to Walmart to get laundry detergent, but you walk out with, I don't know, a Keurig and a Soda Stream or something. I mean, those are the kind of things that, those kind of dollars, if you're shopping all online from people outside of the city, sales tax is collected at the point of delivery. So if you're having it delivered to your house in unincorporated county, Appleton, that's where those sales taxes will go, not the city of Collegedale, because you're not buying it in person here. So residential growth within the city can help mitigate having fewer shoppers from outside the city. So that way, if you have more delivery points within the city, that does mitigate to some degree. I'm not saying that that's a cure-all. So weren't we discussing zoning? Yes. So here's some information as well to keep in mind. About 1,300, a little under 1,300 acres of land in the city is zoned to allow commercial uses. Only 36% of this property is being used to the fullest extent allowed under its commercially zoned status. So based on some overly optimistic assumptions on retail and commercial demand, many properties were preemptively zoned commercial upon annexation, particularly along Appleton Pike, Little W Parkway, and Lee Highway. This was a practice that I believe was to make the city look business friendly. However, just like when you print more money, you make it worth less. And particularly when it's applied to properties that probably aren't most suitable for these kind of uses. So what about other zones? And we'll go back to that. 645 acres, give or take, is I-1 industrial. So it's about 9% of the total land area. And this is a reasonable amount within the city itself. It's generally land away from the city center, legacy zoning, multi-purpose industrial park. So the large users that are in our city that we're thankful to have, they have the zoning that they need, and it's being accommodated appropriately. So back to Appleton Pike and commercial zoning, this is just a Google Street image of Appleton Pike looking west. We've all driven through here. What's on both sides of the road?
Green space.
There's green space, but there's also property that is fallow. It has not been developed, and the road has been completed since, I think, fully completed since 2017. And we're not seeing that commercial development in this corridor. The perception of a site is strong, of a corridor is strong, and first impressions do last. So roadway redesign can greatly improve, of course, capacity, mobility, safety, but roadway design is also shaped by local policy, local land use and zoning, TDOT. So what's the goal in the city? We have a a 4-lane road with a continuous turn lane, otherwise known as a suicide lane. And that was the design that we have for Appleton Pike. That's the design we're going to have to work around at this point. Or, and it's a circular process here. It's shaped by local policy and land use and zoning. But so far, we're not seeing any movement on commercial development. So what's the result? As we said, it's a connected process. So we're left with Appleton Pike right now that is not developing. We do have a lot of interest in, I've talked to someone, well, fairly recently, and I think Wayan has too, to put in a warehousing distribution center on Appleton Pike in a location that would make a lot of people unhappy. And that is something that it's at the gateway of the city. The sales tax, the property tax and or tax generation, capacity for something like that is far less than you might think, other than, as we said earlier, adding rooftops for number one, not just revenue, but that is, having that market, building our retail market, which ultimately has a larger effect and multiplier down the road than just simply a warehousing, property with 200 workers who probably may or may not be able to leave for lunch and go grab something to eat in the city. Though a lot of times that's hard to measure, and that money may or may not be spent in the city. And it would probably be a limited amount given a limited amount of time allowed. So that kind of turns back to some of the other proposals that we've had. Property owners within the city have come to us saying, I have all this commercially zoned property. The city zoned me commercially when we were annexed, but we're not getting anything. It's just the market is not really there for us right now. But what if we did housing? Well, that's a great idea, but guess what? You can't. You have commercial zoning. You'd have to rezone. And, you just want to do townhouses and row houses and a nice development with, owner-occupied. Well, you could go to R3 and then we'd have to. So we've had those conversations with developers already. So what I'm saying is that it's not abstract. We have had these very conversations with more than one developer. So the missing middle housing range, the design of the road, particularly Appleton Pike, and I'm using that just as an example, it's not the only one, does not lend itself to single-family detached residential traditional property development. Ottawa Ringgold Road does at this point. It has I know that road is slated to go into the microscope. We know that. But as far as the design of Appleton Pike currently, it does not lend itself to other kinds of development. So the missing middle housing, people still need a place to live. And so that's what we're bringing to you with a townhouse zone and with this the discussion here. So the daytime population, somehow that got left off here. The daytime population in Collegedale, which includes the employment, so people are leaving the city to go work outside the city, and then people are coming in to work. Basically, our population increases by about 2,300 during the daytime. So these people are commuting from somewhere. Most people who work here do not live here. Why is that? Housing costs, housing availability. So a lot of this is just all intertwined. And so it kind of starts back with the tools in your toolbox, which is why we discuss townhouses. And so if you have any questions, I know we went through that pretty quickly, but just wanted to show you how pulling on this string causes this, and that's what we're charged with looking at.
So at the end of the day, you didn't say this expressly, but you're thinking like down Appleton Pike is potentially an ideal zone for maybe looking at some of these middle types of housing.
Right. We wouldn't necessarily, recommend to preemptively zone properties through there, but just having that available for those who do own property and would like to go in a different direction, or have a buyer who would like to go in a different direction. A lot of times purchases are of land, they're made contingent on the rezoning process. And quite honestly, even with that as a possibility, there are a lot of cases where buyers shy away from that if they don't have those tools, that they know that it's going to be a convoluted process that might get gummed up. And that's not our intention, but that's what they perceive. And so this is breaking through a lot of that as well.
Now, if we did a bunch more residential housing along Apison Pike there, we'd probably end up needing to add stoplights for the ingress and egress. And how would that affect the rest of our population? People who do count on being able to get to the interstate in a certain amount of time. I'm just thinking about, all the different aspects of this.
That's a TDOT decision, and they would do it based on the number of trips on Apison Pike and the projected demand for the development.
And accidents.
And accidents, yeah.
Crashes.
So for instance, if you're only going to have 30 townhomes come in, there's no way you're going to get a light. But if you were bringing in 1,000 residences, regardless of their form, there's a much greater probability that you would get a light.
Or commercial or industrial development would
Correct.
just,
It's the same calculus either way. It's just trips per day.
Do we have a good mixed use zone? Or is that PUD? Is PUD really the only option for that?
We have a mixed use zone. Yes.
it's, and that actually is the sort of a part B on this, that we're seeing that the MUTC mixed use town center has been not efficiently used in the past. And so we are seeing areas where that can be improved. And so this would complement that.
We're talking about tools and it's a lot of transit. You sort of start with nodes and mixed use, and then you sort of transition back to your point, you wouldn't see detached single family close to a mixed use node at a high transportation area, but you probably would see higher density single family townhomes, those types of structures as you transition back. And so again,
Right,
it all goes
step
back to
down from
having
intensity.
Right. Okay. So it goes back to having those options and those tools.
And which we go from really no tool to, R3 down to R1. And that's why we're seeing that's such a span there with nothing in that step down. You can't step down if you don't have another step there.
And some other things our community is known for is like our scenic beauty and our outdoor experiences. And I'm just thinking how some of these decisions play into those bigger things of what we're known for and how making this change impacts that or not, or more questions than answers.
Open space contributes to that.
And the connectivity to all of it.
Internal connectivity, there's provision for internal sidewalks are required. And then if there are existing sidewalks, they must connect there. So there are no sidewalks to nowhere if we can prevent that.
Thank you for those details and those thoughts.
This is a high level look at it, but it's sort of an overview of what we discuss weekly.
Well, it's helpful for me to have an idea of what you're seeing at the big picture, because as we have cases come in here, it's like without that bigger picture knowledge of what's happening, it's hard to, if something comes here, then I don't have the knowledge of what's happening, a bigger picture to compare that to. So I really appreciate that. Thank you. Any other thoughts or comments on the changing zoning demand? Okay, so let's head back to our townhouse zone. And if there's further discussion or if you all are ready, I can go ahead and entertain a motion on that.
Let me ask you a question. Wasn't there a comment about patio homes and whether that should stay in or out? I'm just trying to make sure I understand. Was that a comment that was made and does that need?
It was
to
a
stay in or-
suggestion that,
Okay.
that I have for the commission that patio homes specifically be, references be taken out and just reference 0 lot line, single-family dwellings, detached dwellings. And that would provide additional, or 0 lot line developments would provide additional flexibility that would accommodate patio homes plus some others that would use that same footprint more or less.
Okay, so it wasn't really, it was coming out of this R1T. It was, okay.
Right. It was my suggestion here tonight, if that's, if, you know, a recommendation that that the commissioners feel that would be helpful. I personally do in looking at it at this point, reading the patio home, and when that question did come up, I can see that that would be a helpful amendment.
Okay, further discussion? I'm ready to entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion with the amendment to the patio homes and R1T suggestions for zoning changes.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mayor Lamb. Commissioner Garver,
Yes.
Member Lehman,
Yes.
Member Moody,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Givens,
Yes.
Chairwoman Gray.
Yes.
And that's all we have, and that will go to the Board of Commissioners for first reading, and then we'll have another tool in the toolbox, be better than we were before.
Okay.
Well done.
And with that,
Thank you.
we are adjourned. Thank you all very much for being here tonight.
Somebody,